I woke up that morning to the sound of silence, the kind that makes your stomach drop. The pipes in my house weren't humming, the faucets weren't running, and when I twisted the kitchen tap, all I got was a wheeze of air followed by a pathetic spit of water. My water was gone. It wasn't a city issue, it wasn't a burst main. It was my neighbor Karen, the self-appointed queen of our HOA, who had decided to cut me off. And before the week was over, her own basement would look like the Titanic. At first I thought I was imagining things. I checked the bathroom, the laundry room, same result, nothing but air. Then my phone buzzed with a text from Mike, my neighbor across the street. "You got water," Karen bragging online about handling things for the HOA. That was it? My stomach twisted. Karen had been harassing me for weeks about the rain barrels I kept by my garage. To me, they were practical, cheap, simple, and better than wasting water on the lawn. To her, they were an eyesore, a violation of her imaginary suburban utopia. She had screeched about them in the last HOA meeting, like my plastic tubs were lowering property values more than her peeling shutters, but shutting off my water supply. That was a new level of crazy. I stormed outside and went straight to the curb box, the steel lid where the shutoff valve sits. The dirt around it was fresh, like someone had been digging. My chest tightened. I pried open the lid, and sure enough the valve was cranked hard to the off position. She didn't even try to hide it. Only one person in the neighborhood had that level of smug audacity, Karen. And, like clockwork, she came striding down the sidewalk at that very moment, arms crossed, wearing her too tight yoga pants and that faded pink visor like it was a crown. "Don't you dare touch that," she barked. Dogs started barking with her. The HOA voted to cut off unauthorized water storage. "This is for the community's good," I laughed, bitter and sharp. "Karen, you don't run city utilities. This is tampering with infrastructure. It's illegal." Her lips twitched, holding back a grin. "I spoke with people, important people. They agree with me. You're wasting resources. The bylaws are clear." I cut her off. I'd read those bylaws, every tedious page. The HOA has no authority over municipal water. You crossed a line. Her eyes flickered just for a second, but then she doubled down. "Maybe the city will thank me." I turned the valve back on and walked away. Water rushing back into my pipes, leaving her fuming on the curb. But inside, I wasn't calm. She had gone too far, and I knew people like her, they don't stop, they escalate. That night, she proved me right. A notice appeared on my door, stamped with the HOA logo, declaring my barrels a violation of aesthetic guidelines. At the bottom, Karen's signature labeling herself acting compliance officer. She wasn't even on the compliance committee. This wasn't about rules. This was about power, and she wasn't done. A few days later, my garden hose was cut clean through. Neighbors reported their sprinklers mysteriously failing bird baths drained. Karen was waging a full-on water crusade while her own lawn turned into a patchy wasteland. The worst moment came when I found flyers stuffed in everyone's mailbox. "Dangerous neighbor." They screamed, accusing me of breeding mosquitoes, hoarding water, sabotaging community safety. When I saw my name plastered on cheap copy paper, my stomach dropped. For a second, I wondered if she was right. Maybe I was making life harder by refusing to cave. Maybe I should just take down the barrels, avoid the war. I felt small, humiliated, cornered by a woman who seemed unstoppable with nothing but a clipboard and endless rage. But then I remembered the valve box, the fresh dirt, the smug smirk. She was committing crimes and disguising them as rules. That wasn't power, it was desperation. And if she wanted war, I wasn't going to fight it with fists, I'd fight it with proof. I ordered a small motion-activated camera, installed it discreetly by the curb box, and waited. It didn't take long. Mid-afternoon, while neighbors walked their dogs, Karen crouched by my shutoff valve, pliers in hand, muttering to herself like she was performing some sacred duty. I nearly laughed watching the live feed. I downloaded the footage, tucked it into a folder I labeled Karen Crimes, and smiled. The long game had begun. Days later, a storm rolled in. Heavy rain, the kind that tests everyone's drainage. I had prepped my sump pump weeks before. Karen, too obsessed with sabotaging me to fix her own yard, hadn't touched hers. That night, while my basement stayed dry, her foundation turned into a pond. Lights flickered in her house as she and her husband ran around with buckets. I sipped my coffee by the window, listening to the rain pound down, and thought sometimes you don't need revenge. Nature does it for you. But Karen wasn't about to admit defeat. The next morning, she stood on her porch, dripping wet, shouting at anyone who would listen, "Due to certain negligent neighbors, our community's drainage has failed. We will levy emergency assessments," Mike finally snapped. "Karen, the city maintains drainage, not the HOA. And you're the one who's been messing with pipes." Her face flushed crimson. She jabbed her clipboard like a weapon. Defamation, lies. At the emergency HOA meeting she called on her porch, she tried to turn it into a trial. She pointed straight at me, shrieking that my barrels had diverted a storm into her basement. I calmly raised my phone, hit play, and projected the video of her crouched at my curb box, twisting the valve shut. Silence fell. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Denise, the HOA treasurer, crossed her arms. Mike let out a low whistle. Karen lunged forward, screaming, "That's fake. Deep fakes." But no one was buying it. Even Harold, the HOA president, shook his head. "Karen, this is serious. You tampered with city utilities. You could be liable." The collapse had begun. City inspectors showed up with clipboards issuing her violation notices. Another storm came, and once again her basement filled. The smell of mildew spread down the street. Her flyers accusing me of water crimes were laughed at, taped to trash cans and barbecues as jokes. Her husband, worn down and silent, looked like a man waiting for the earth to swallow him. Still, she wouldn't quit. She filed a small claims lawsuit alleging I had diverted rainfall and illegally hoarded municipal resources. I nearly laughed myself sick reading it. At the courthouse, she stormed in with binders accusing me of manipulating hydrological balances. The judge raised an eyebrow. "Are you suggesting your neighbor controls the weather?" she stammered. "Well, not controls exactly, but manipulates it. It's science." I handed over my USB. The video played on the courtroom screen, her voice muttering justice for the neighborhood as she twisted my valve. Then I submitted her cease and desist letter, plagiarized from Wikipedia, threatening to sue me under federal statutes that didn't exist. The judge sighed. Case dismissed. The gavel cracked, and with it Karen's empire shattered. She stormed out, visor askew, papers flying in the wind, shouting about conspiracies. But the neighborhood had already moved on. She was stripped of her fake authority, banned from sending flyers, ignored in meetings. Inspectors fined her. Insurance denied her claims. Another storm sealed her fate. Her basement swamped again, her husband finally packing up and leaving. She was left on her porch alone, shouting at clouds like they were her final enemies. And me, I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate. I just poured myself a glass of water from the faucet, steady and clear, and took a long sip. Because sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't what you do, it's watching someone drown in the consequences they created. Lesson learned: control fueled by arrogance always collapses under its own weight.